Hello and welcome back to the live coverage from Pro Tour, Hour of Devastation. I'm Tim Willoughby, joined by Hall of Famer Luis Scott Vargas. And we got an exciting moment because this is where the players put aside their 40-card decks, pick up their 60, 75 cards, and sit down for some constructed. Now, Luis, normally going into a Pro Tour, there are 3 or 4 decks that we're really looking out for. For this Pro Tour, though, there are quite a few more.
Yeah, I would expect to see a very wide range of decks, especially at the beginning. Field might narrow, as it usually does, but for the most part, we're going to see a lot of different things in the feature match area.
We're actually going to head down to our feature match area right now, and I can tell you this, in spite of the fact that we have 8 players that feature from a relatively small number of teams, we have 8 different decks in our feature match area. Let's head down and check out our round 4 here at Pro Tour Hour of Devastation. Hello and welcome to this round 4 of Pro Tour Hour of Devastation. We have an absolutely star-studded feature match area for you for this first constructed round of the tournament. Both of our Hall of Fame elect players, so that's Josh Utter-Layton and Martin User, are in the feature match area. But believe it or not, that's not even where we're starting, because on table 1 in the front, we have William Jensen from Team Puzzle Quest. He won GP Kyoto last weekend, had his birthday yesterday, and things are going great for him so far. He's on 3-0, up against his teammate, Reid Duke, also from Team Puzzle Quest. 2 power highs of the game, both escaped the draft rounds without a loss, and on 2 different decks here now that we move into standard. Attune with Ether coming along here from Reid Duke, signaling that he looks to be on an energy plan. A few different energy plans available, but I believe that he is on Teamer energy.
Yeah, he's on a kind of mid-range energy deck. This is actually what the Marvel decks kind of look like, just without Marvel and with the top end of cards like Glorybringer, Woodland Wanderer, 1 copy of Nicole Bolas, God Pharaoh. So it's you expect to see cards that affect the board like Abrade and Harness Lightning, and then Rogue Refiner and Whirler Virtuoso to play to the mid-game.
So the Servant of the Conduit there coming down, which will help accelerate both the energy and mana of Reid Duke. Meanwhile, on the other side of things, William Jensen, he's on a slightly different plan. Voltaic Brawler coming down on the second term, and that's signaling that he's going a little bit more aggressive, because this is the deck that we're referring to as the red-green Pummeler deck.
So this is more of a combo deck that's trying to combine pump spells with cards like Voltaic Brawler or Pummeler, and just keep doubling, cast your larger than life, and then fling or use something along those lines, Invigorated Rampage to get the damage through.
Yeah, this might be a tricky old matchup for our advantage bar, because what often seems to happen with the red-green Pummeler deck is that it can go from 0 to hero very, very quickly. Once it starts casting a flurry of spells, perhaps with an electrostatic Pummeler to double and then double again, it can win out of nowhere. Meanwhile, Reid Duke, at least in the early game, I guess, is trying to stop that.
A lot of this matchup is going to be about whether Reid can keep Huey off of any threats, because Reid has a lot more cards that are good if nothing else is going on than Huey. Huey's got a lot of pump spells. If he has no creatures in play, they don't do a whole lot. So Huey's the more proactive deck. Reid's trying to contain Huey, and then if he can, then Reid will eventually win a long game.
Now, looking at Reid's hand, it looks there like he's got lots of permanents. He's got Rogue Refiners, Whirler Virtuosos, Nicol Bolas in hand. Not too many instant ways of interacting. How will he feel about that, knowing that I'm sure that he knows that this is the matchup he's facing?
Reid would love to draw Harness Lightning or Abrade. His draw is decent. It gets out pretty fast for not having those cards, but because he is short on those cards, he is vulnerable to Huey, to William having a quick combo finish.
For now, of course, all set up for Jensen. Does play down the Electrostatic Pummeler. That one of the easiest cards with which the red-green deck can win out of nowhere, because if you've got enough energy, you can give it +X until the end of the turn, where X is its power. If you've already played some pump spells, that's an awful lot of extra damage.
And one of the newer cards from Hour of Devastation, Hashep Oasis in William's hand there, that having your land double as a pump spell is a pretty nice little bit of advantage.
Another Rogue Refiner here coming from Reid Duke. His energy growing quite nicely here, and on top of that, of course, drawing a card while putting a body on the board. Another Oaths of Nissa. Of course, only one of them gets to stay in play, but in the meantime, Reid having a lot of options here to just improve the quality of his draws, though if what he really wants is instants, then the Oath maybe not finding what he needs. Glorybringer coming off the top, though.
And that's going to provide a pretty good threat because even if William uses a pump spell to save whatever gets targeted by Glorybringer, that still reduces the amount of cards William has that can go for lethal. So William's got to decide now whether he wants to commit cards to the board or perhaps threaten to try to kill Reid. Though looking at William's hand, he does not have any pump spells. He just has more creatures, a Long Tusk Cub and a Pummeler, so he can just continue adding those to the board. And Reid kind of has to play like Huey has one or two pump spells in hand at all times. It's hard not to, but Huey knows that he's not that close to killing Reid.
So when Reid looks at the Glorybringer that's in his hand, will he be considering that more as a way of controlling the board than a big flyer that can beat down and get the win?
Reid is not likely to finish the game with Glorybringer as much as clear William's board, and at that point, then he can take control, and yeah, he can win with Rogue Refiner. So it doesn't really matter how Reid wins once he puts William in a position to be unable to win quickly.
So Jensen here, just developing his land base, not too much in the way of things that he can do for pump for now, though that energy is at 7, so we're talking about 2 opportunities to double up Electrostatic Pummeler's power. We already know about that Haship Oasis, so 1 becomes 4, becomes 8, becomes 16. It gets pretty scary quite quickly at this point.
What William is lacking is a card like Fling or Invigorated Rampage to get him through, whether it's Trample or just direct damage like Fling.
So an interesting spot for Reid here. You can see him thinking very hard there. I guess this is one of the cool things about the Pummeler deck. Even though we know that what Huey has going on, what William has going on is largely additional copies of permanents he's got in play, Reid has to assume that there could be death coming at any moment.
And that's one of the advantages of a deck like Red-Green Pummeler. Your opponent always feels like they're a step away from dying. It's like playing Infect in Modern, for example, where your opponent's 2 or 3 unknown cards in hand always seem to be pump spells, even though in this case they really aren't.
And Jensen, one of the more unreadable players on the Pro Tour, even for someone like Reid, who has probably played more matches against him than almost anyone in the room. We've just heard that Ronus the Indomitable has also popped up for William Jensen. That's going to be an interesting one for him. It's another way of him forcing through damage because it grants trample and also, of course, a big body on the board that can pump whichever creature is attacking for the most. Is having multiple copies of Electrostatic Pummeler a big advantage for William here because it sort of forces Reid to stop and try and second guess which is getting pumped?
It can do that. They can each demand blockers, but because they started as 1/1s, it's pretty costly to get in a fight with, say, Rogue Refiner. William either has to pump twice or use like a pump spell, and neither outcome is very good. So what we're going to see, I think, a decent amount of, as we've seen so far, is William kind of just biding his time and trying to kill Reid in one shot rather than playing an attrition game. Because playing an attrition game against triple Rogue Refiner, not a very good plan.
There does come Ronus the Indomitable, and that desert is now in play. So at this point, Jensen is threatening a lot of damage. Now, I guess that one of the interesting things watching these 2 high-level players play is that I would be very tempted when I first looked at this Pummeler deck to say, I should always be in the red zone, I should be attacking, this is a deck that attacks. In point of fact, we've not seen anything attacking for the entire game thus far. I guess that Jensen's content to just wait until the right moment.
He really doesn't want to expend any energy on the Pummelers or spells on the Pummelers until he's threatening lethal. And this deck is very capable of doing that in one fell swoop.
Now, it looks like there's a Blossoming Defense in hand for Jensen. Because that grants hexproof, potentially a really important card for him to have because it means that Reid would need so much more interaction to stop whichever threat he goes all in on.
Blossom Defense is key, especially if you expect a field full of cards like Abrade. And Abrade is going to be one of the more played cards in this tournament. So William has certainly tested against that card and is aware of what it takes to stop it.
Well, it does now look like Reid is up to 7 mana, and that means that, well, next turn, once he's got all of that mana untapped, Nicol Bolas may come down. I guess it is interesting to see whether or not Reid pulls the trigger on Nicol Bolas sooner rather than later, because if he does that, he's tapped out, and that means that William kind of knows he can go for it.
And despite being very powerful, Nicol Bolas is not the most board-affecting card against a deck like the Red-Green Pummeler deck. I wouldn't expect to be a card Reid is all that happy to tap out for.
Worth noting that Jensen did start this game on a 6-card hand. Kind of a tough deck to mulligan with because it does want critical mass of spells. But thus far, it seems to be going okay for him.
Well, the effect of a mulligan is blunted the longer the game goes on, because relatively the one-card disadvantage becomes smaller. So at this point, I don't think Huey's feeling it too badly, though it certainly can matter in the first few turns.
Reid Duke, the first to enter the red zone, getting in with a couple of those Rogue Refiners. And Willa Virtuoso representing a lot of additional toughness on this board with 12 energy, just sat waiting to go for Reid Duke here.
And an Invigorated Rampage does give William some more options as well. So he's got, this could be a good turn to go for it. He is going to assume Reid has one interactive spell with that 2 mana that Reid has up. But given that, whether he can still assemble a kill is what he's figuring out right now. And it looks like he should be able to.
Effectively, each of these pump spells represents 2 or 3 pump spells thanks to all of that energy that's sat lying around.
And William can play this a few different ways. He can cast Blossoming Defense on one of his pummelers, and then Reid has to respond by killing that one. Or he can just start playing his other pump spell and using doubling effects on a pummeler, and then if Reid goes to kill it, then use Blossoming Defense. Either way, it works out fairly well, and either way, I think William Jensen, because he can double 3 times after using a pump spell, he's going to be in pretty good shape here.
Ronus the Indomitable, of course, already helping out, even though it's not getting stuck into the red zone. And the first order of the day for Reid is to make some Thopters in order to be able to at least present as much defense as possible.
And even though Hugh is capable of doing tons and tons of damage, he only has to deal 20. He doesn't actually have to go for maximum overkill here.
So let's see some spells. First up, Invigorated Rampage. Looks like it's +4/+0 and trample in this case.
Yeah, I would expect him to just target the one pummeler he wants to go in on. And now he's going to be able to make it a 5 power, double it to 10, double it to 20, double it to 40, and then if Reid goes to kill it, just cast the Blossoming Defense.
Sometimes you just need the one attack step. Let's see if Reid's got any more play. Just the one energy left over. Here's the Abrade, immediately responded to by Blossoming Defense. And that leaves Reid tapped out, so I think that this is going to be game for game 1 here in the Puzzle Quest matchup. Alrighty, that is the end of our game 1 between William Jensen and Reid Duke. William Jensen having a banner week here in Japan, already having picked up the GP win, having yet to pick up any losses here at the Pro Tour. We'll be back with more of that match very, very soon indeed. But first, we're going to have a few messages.
Unleash your endgame next weekend. Bring your best standard deck to become the Hour of Devastation Game Day champion of your game store. Top finishers are awarded full art premium promo cards and an exclusive Game Day champion playmat for the winner. Find a game day near you at magic.wizards.com/gameday.
The Magic the Gathering World Championship features 24 players, 2 teams, and 3 days of the best Magic this year as they compete for over $350,000, with the winner getting a cool $100 grand and the title of World Champion. Tune in October 6th through 8th to twitch.tv/magic to see it all unfold.
and welcome back to this round 4 of Pro Tour Hour of Devastation, our main match between William Huey Jensen and Reid Duke. They're just sideboarding, so we're going to get a chance to look back on one of our other tables. It's a couple more members of this sort of super team. These guys are on D3 Go. We have Tom Martell and Brock Parker. Martell on a zombies list, pretty similar to what we saw from Jerry Thompson winning the Pro Tour last time, but looking in rough shape here against the aggressive red deck of Brock Parker. Karizev in play. 3 life left for Tom Martell, and these red decks, they don't even necessarily need spells to get those final points of damage in.
No, Ramunap Ruins is a key card for the mono red deck, and having access to 4 copies of that and 4 Sun-Scorched Deserts means that Brock Parker can easily deal 3 to 5 damage off just his lands. So you see 2 Sun-Scorched Deserts in play, so a Ramunap Ruins threatens 6 points of damage total right now.
Now, the good thing that's going on for Tom Martell here, he's got 2 copies of Lord of the Accursed in play, plus 2 Relentless Dead, so he is presenting a lot of damage, much of which can have Menace if he wants it to. So, in spite of the life totals, this is pretty close here. It's all going to come down to whether or not Brock's got a way of breaking up the wombo combo that Tom Martell has going on with the zombies he has in play.
Looks like Brock's going to have 1 draw step, and if he can draw something like an Incendiary Flow, then he'll be able to take this game. But other than that, he's actually going to die fairly quickly. Just the double Lord threatens a ton of damage.
Also makes it difficult for the red deck to be able to remove creatures easily. The toughness is actually pretty high on those zombies right now. And I was talking to Kenji Samura about decks in Standard yesterday. He basically said, I like the zombies deck in part because I think it's got a good matchup against red decks.
Yeah, and it looks like Brock, he fired off a shock end of turn to reduce Tom to 1, and despite that, could not find the last point of damage here.
Yeah, looks like Tom Martell should be able to push this through. Plays a West Vale Abbey. And it looks like he might have Liliana's Mastery to follow up here just to be doubly sure. Yeah, that's enough for Brock to show that he's got just 2 mountains in play. Tom Martell picks up that one. The 2 monocolor aggro decks able to get things done, where on the front table we saw 4 colors from Reid and obviously the 2-color sort of aggro combo deck coming from William Jensen. Lots of different options available, and worth noting that we've seen 2 matchups between players on the same team, each of whom are on completely different decks. Does that basically mean that there's lots of good decks in this format and no real consensus best deck?
That is what it points to. When you have teammates playing different decks, and like you said, there's lots of different decks even among the same teams, then that means that no one really has a deck they're super confident in, and there's a lot of different viable decks.
So stay tuned all weekend as we try and iterate closer to at least what some of the better options are. It looks like there's plenty of good options. You can see there William Jensen just shuffling up, getting ready for his game 2. How much are we likely to see the matchup between Jensen and Duke changing after sideboarding?
Generally, what you're going to look for when you're playing against the Pummeler deck is more ways to interact. And Reid's got a couple copies of Magma Spray and a couple copies of Negate, but not a whole lot other than that. Whereas William doesn't have a whole lot that he would really lean on. He can make his deck a little bit more mid-rangey with Tireless Tracker or Chandra Torch of Defiance, but that might not even be that appealing. He's not looking to win attrition games against Reid here.
Jensen looks to be happy enough just dealing out his 7 here. He'll be on the draw this time round. 6 cards, in fact, for William Jensen here. Yet to catch a break in terms of having a full hand at the beginning of the game, but it didn't prove too costly for him in game 1. And Oath of Nissa, the first play here coming from Duke, so he's able to find the lands that he needs, catches a mountain off the top thanks to Oath of Nissa. And this deck is now stretching to 4 colors. How much of a stretch really is that for these energy decks?
Not much of one at all. Ether Hub goes a long way. Also, Oath of Nissa being able to help cast Nicol Bolas is basically the only black card in the deck is just 1 copy of Nicol Bolas, and then Woodland Wanderer likes having access to an additional color as well. So it has a very, very low impact on the mana base. Reid isn't playing a Swamp, for example. He's just playing the 4 Ether Hubs and a Blooming Marsh plus Oath of Nissa.
The Woodland Wanderer, an interesting one. I've heard it talked about by a few players as being a creature that survives Hour of Devastation. 6 toughness, pretty big in this format. We will wait to see whether or not that one actually comes to pass. Attune with Ether here coming from Reid, as he's just playing setup in these early turns, though he is able to get a little hit in with that Servant of the Conduit on William Jensen, who, at least for now, playing things kind of slow and steady.
And despite William's deck being an aggressive deck, one that attacks the opponent's life total, it's not one that needs to curve out. Like we saw, no attacks, no attacks, no attacks, attack for 40, and that's what the deck does. It is not contingent on getting in chip damage here.
Tireless Tracker there, the play for Jensen. That is a card that's come in from the sideboard, so he has made some concession to being a little bit more mid-rangey. I guess that if he knows that there's a chance there's going to be more straight-up removal for his big kind of combo creatures, this is a good way of him splitting the difference. An Exerted Glorybringer taking down that tracker while it still can.
I just like that Glorybringer and Servant of the Conduit are tapped at different angles.
I mean, maybe that's just one of the ways that Reid likes to show Exert. Of course, on the feature match area, we do have Exert tokens. That's all nice and clear for you. Bristling Hydra coming down for Jensen, and this is one that can gain hexproof whenever you like, but of course it doesn't have the ability to double its power in quite the way that an electrostatic pummeler does, so going all in on this one a little bit trickier.
What Hydra does is it provides a threat that is a little more resilient naturally, even though it is less explosive. So this is a threat that can win incrementally.
Yeah, the life total is moving a little bit more than in game one, and with a second copy of Bristling Hydra, it does mean that Williams here going to be able to protect his Hydras fairly well and maybe even move in simply to get more damage through by throwing some of that energy on one or other of them. Wow, it looks like Reid is drawing fairly thin in terms of additional threats here. Nicol Bolas did stay in after sideboarding, so it looks like Reid does like that one. Whirler Virtuoso, the pickup there. It's pretty much Glorybringer doing the heavy lifting for Duke at the moment, though.
And the Hydra's doing a pretty good job of preventing Glorybringer from, having too many easy targets.
And actually here, it looks like the Dragon simply performing a beatdown roll here. No blockers available for William Jensen. And Whirler Virtuoso means that potentially a pretty steady stream of blockers for Reid. Those copies of the Hydra, they don't have trample, so there is going to need to be some additional help if Jensen wants to get through whichever blockers Reid chooses to throw in front of his creatures. Quite a change in the pace of this game as we come to game two. Trading blows here. And Reid still has to consider that there could be a flurry of pump spells. It really doesn't take too many quality pump spells for him to be in trouble. I mean, even a pump spell and a fling could make this a lethal attack.
Well, William does have access to an Invigorated Rampage in hand. He's a few points short of killing Reid this turn. What this is going to come down to really is whether Reid can grind through all the energy that William has. Because Reid has access to a lot of chump blockers. He gets to make some Thopter tokens. He's still going to run into problems actually finishing the game here, especially since William actually picked up a Harness Lightning. And that giving him an answer to Glorybringer means he's no longer on a clock.
Harness Lightning, an interesting one for Jensen in this matchup, because occasionally it'll just get used to generate 3 energy, right?
That does happen sometimes, and removal spells are not generally at a premium against a control deck, and Reid's deck does play out somewhat controlling, but killing Glorybringer is something that is worth doing.
A similar kind of scenario to last game, 2 identical creatures attacking and Reid having to figure out where he wants to split his various blockers. He's at least threatening to kill off one here.
So, given these current blocks, he can save the Hydra that's getting triple blocked, but it would require him to use all of his energy, at which point it would be vulnerable to any removal spell from Reid's direction, including casting the Cold Bolus and dealing 7. Though that could lead William to make that harnessed lightning play. Or he could use harnessed lightning to just kill Whirler Virtuoso and then pump the Hydra once here.
Well, looks like Jensen kicking things off with that harness lightning. Eight energy, critically not as exciting a multiple of 3 as 9. And there's the invigorated rampage, getting split this time so that there's the potential for trample on both sides.
And there's a decent chance Huey just trades off the Hydra here and then it settles for dealing a bunch of damage to Reid.
A much less complicated board, and it's William Jensen who has the only creature left. And still 8 energy with which to protect it if need be.
And that will mean that Nicol Bolas is once again not the most effective of plays. Reid can tap out for a 7-mana Planeswalker here, and it still doesn't quite get the job done. Very close to actually just killing William, but not quite there.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because, again, we're in a spot where if you do tap out for Nicol Bolas, that's like saying, I've got nothing else. Go for it, see if you can kill me. And against a deck like Red Green Pummeler, even with not very many cards in hand, that's a risky proposition.
Also, the +2 on Bolas does not yield the results you want a lot of the time, just because if you hit a pump spell, then you end up basically just breaking here.
He's going to go for it. So he's exiling the top card of William Jensen's library, and you get to play it without paying its mana cost. In that instance, actually kind of a great hit for Reid Duke. Gets a Servant of the Conduit.
Any creature is what Reid was looking for, because that can stop the Hydra. And William doesn't have a way to give trample right now, so he's kind of forced into just attacking and hoping to run out the clock here against Nicol Bolas.
Yeah, both of these players basically living off the top of their decks here. They have lots in the way of mana, not too much else, and the top of Reid's deck, doing him some favors, finds Chandra on the top of his deck. That one will be a big one. Chandra Torture Defiance coming down, another source of potential card advantage, and indeed another way of piling up removal if he was going to try and get through that Bristling Hydra.
So despite Huey only having 1 card in hand, Reid wanted to play it safe and just exile Huey's last card, just so he knows that his next couple plays are kind of at the mercy of the top of Huey's deck, but not of any pump spells he has saved up.
I'm not sure quite how it works in terms of flavor, Chandra on the same side as Nicol Bolas, but in terms of effectiveness, hard to argue. No, Oath of Nissa also meaning that casting these Planeswalkers, very straightforward indeed. And we got our first matchup update for you. Hall of Fame-elect Martin User, unfortunately falling to Elias Klocker from Austria. That one is going to be one that he's going to have to bounce back from the next few turns. But in the meantime, Chandra is taken down by Bristling Hydra, which did need to get pumped in order to get there. 5 energy still remaining for William Jensen, who just really needs to draw some live action here as Nicol Bolas gradually just approaching ultimate. And gods on side for Nicol Bolas now. Ronus the Indomitable coming down. It's going to take a little bit of work for Ronus the Indomitable to be able to attack here, but at least it's a card that is not one being drawn by William Jensen.
So had Huey drawn something good this turn, he would have a pretty significant advantage because Ronus not doing a whole lot on this board, but Huey also a couple points short of killing Nicol Bolas or Reid Duke. You know, both powerful Planeswalkers in their own right.
Yeah, Reid on 11 life, Nicol Bolas on 12 loyalty. Would not want to say who was more powerful. Looks like William decided that Nicol Bolas was the bigger threat right now.
All right, this is going to be a pretty big hit as Reid once again seeing what Huey's deck has to offer. And
Assume with Ether, not necessarily an exciting hit for Reid. At least he gets to thin his deck a little bit, find another land. And we've heard that Tom Martell, we saw his zombies during our live look-in, did defeat Brock Parker 2-0. So the zombies proving their worth against these red decks. That's something that might prove useful to know when you're picking your decks for Friday Night Magic or PPTQs in the near future.
Both players playing off the top of the deck. The Reid happens to be playing off the top of Huey's deck. And seeing what they can yield here, because this is a very close game, though. Huey, with the first draw step, from here, has a pretty big edge.
Tireless Tracker, the pickup there for Jensen off the top of his deck. If he's been holding on to lands, that effectively could yield him a few additional draws here. Looks like there is a game trail in hand. So first up, here comes the Tracker, and almost immediately a land coming into play. That warranting a clue that doesn't even get bothered to put on the table, because you know what? William Jensen loves drawing cards and finds a Blossoming Defenses.
So he's not quite to the point where he can kill Nicol Bolas, but he is able to threaten to kill Reid next turn.
I mean, on 8 life, he needs to be vaguely aware of issues with Nicol Bolas, but 8 is more than 7, so Reid Duke really hoping to find something big here. Very close play here. Reid needs to find something. Electrostatic Pummeler, there's a fair amount of energy available to Reid Duke here.
And he's got to Ronus the Indomitable, so that actually is a substantial threat in terms of finishing the game, and it can potentially make Ronus into a blocker. So that was a pretty nice hit for Reid Duke here.
Yeah, it would cost a lot of energy to turn Ronus into a blocker, but given that Reid's plan isn't necessarily to go for the big combo kill game in quite the same way that William is, you may well find that that's a good option.
And Ronus does do a pretty good job himself of just making creatures bigger so that Ronus is activated. So I think that Huey's going to have a slightly harder time killing Reid than he had before that Pummeler hit.
Blossoming Defense there being used to save Tireless Tracker from an Abrade. And Reid there playing a game trail, revealing a land, so basically saying, what I've got on the board is what I've got, and most of what I've got is what you had. Let's see what comes off the top of William Jensen's deck here, if he's going to be able to put this one away. Long Tusk Cub, the pickup. Now, Nicol Bolas's minus ability might prove relevant sometime very shortly.
Yeah, I think given that Huey missed, he doesn't have great attacks here. He can force the Pummeler. Pummeler can be activated 3 times, so 1, 2, 4, 8. So it can survive, but it uses up all the energy. And Huey might be forced to do that, losing a creature to Ronus the Indomitable in order to keep himself from dying to Pummeler on the next turn. But that gives Reid the first fresh draw step here.
And I guess that at this point, Jensen happy that a large proportion of his Bristling Hydras have already come from his deck, because he doesn't really want Nicol Bolas on a plus ability to find one, because that would just naturally turn on Ronus. Harness Lightning in hand for William Jensen. That might prove a way of forcing things to be complicated for that Pummeler. We've got ourselves a bit of a staring contest here. Reid Duke gets to untap.
And now, because Huey didn't go for it here, Reid has a bunch of energy at his disposal. And Ronus plus the Pummeler, there's a reason Huey's playing that combo. It is an effective combo, and Reid now is going to be able to pump the Pummeler enough times that he should be able to finish things off here, especially given that Bolas is ready to deal 7.
Turnabout is fair play, and it looks like Nicol Bolas is using all of the tools that William Jensen has provided in order to service's downfall here. And the fact that Ronus is the one that's doing the pumping here, and that we haven't even had to worry about Electrostatic Pummeler using its +X ability, means that even though there's a Harness Lightning in hand for William Jensen, he might just not be able to do enough damage with it.
Hugh can deal 8 damage with Harness Lightning. So Huey should actually be able to kill the Pummeler with Harness Lightning. He loses the Tireless Tracker to Ronus, which has Indestructible and Death Touch.
Crucially, Ronus not able to give Trample to itself, meaning that at least it becomes a little bit trickier for Reid here, but he is able to square things up and push a game 3. Well, we weren't sure how good Nicol Bolas was in this matchup. Did everything in due course here in game 2. Those two will be going to a game 3, and there's another game 3 going on in our feature match area, though. We've heard that Josh Isolaton's been able to square things up. They're still preparing for their match to kick off. We're going to be staying with this one so that we can see the conclusion of this. But for you Josh Isolator fans out there, he is not out of it yet. You can see in the back they're just presenting at the same time. So basically we want to make sure that we can catch the whole of this one good and clean. It doesn't look like there's going to be too much re-sideboarding between these players going into game 3. How important is the play or draw in this particular matchup?
It's relevant. It's not the most lopsided. Like neither player's playing mono red, and a lot of these decks are just about combining certain cards more than curving out in a specific way. Certainly would rather be on the play.
We saw at the very end of that game, it looked like there was a negate available to Reid Duke that he had in hand should anything have gone really painfully wrong. Ultimately, having that meant that he was able to stop Harness Lightning, and just takes a second look at his sideboard to make sure that there doesn't need to be any kind of a spot adjustment.
Yeah, I think it's possible that William wanted to attack the previous turn to force the Pummeler to use some energy up, but he decided that he didn't want to do that, and he knew that Reid only had a land in hand. On the other hand, Reid wasn't necessarily forced to block the Tireless Tracker itself, so it was tricky. Playing against that deck is tricky, especially when you're playing against a bunch of cards that aren't normally in your opponent's deck.
I'm sure that these two will have got in a fair amount of test games of this exact matchup. These two firm friends, both members of Team Puzzle Quest, and both in our top 25 at the moment. Reid currently ranked 3rd in the top 25 rankings, and with this the last Pro Tour of the season, potentially looking to jump up a little bit further. I know it's a pretty hotly contested race between him and another team member, Owen Turtenwald, in terms of who's going to be the team captain for Team USA at the World Magic Cup. All right, will we have an opening 7 that both players can keep? Looks like there's lands and spells there for Jensen, but it's this time Reid that's going to have to go back and see if his 6 is going to be good enough.
Jensen's opening hand could be from Reid's deck. 2 Tireless Trackers, Harness Lightning, Attune, and lands. So it looks like he's morphed into more of a mid-range deck himself.
I guess that plan a little bit trickier to disrupt with just sort of 1 key spell at the right moment. Tireless Tracker plus a slightly land-heavy hand actually means that the extra lands don't feel like so much of a burden, and that's before you even consider the fact that some of those lands can cycle. Game Trail coming down there and is coming in untapped, which means that Attune with Ether able to kick things off. There we can see Reid Duke, the number 3 by his name, indicating where he's at in terms of the top 25 right now. Not played in as many events as his opponent, but you know what? Those stats are very, very good indeed. This season going fantastically well for Reid, and looking to end it with a big exclamation point to potentially even lock up Player of the Year if things go really well. 7th the Conduit coming from Jensen, who is doing a great job of pretending to be Teemo Energy this game.
Oh yeah, and that's going to curve nicely into Tireless Tracker plus a land drop next turn, assuming that Reid doesn't take out the Servant with a Braid, which he very well may.
Yeah, I guess that a Braid gets fairly well taxed in this matchup. Lots of creatures that you're going to want to remove at some point.
And it's always tricky because Williams' deck is not particularly high curve either, so I'm not surprised that Reid chose not to go after Servant of the Conduit here.
Channeler Initiate kind of serving as an additional Servant of the Conduit in this deck some of the time, and though it can, of course, beat down at some point. And there's the Tireless Tracker immediately generating a clue. This time it gets a token because there's not the mana to cash it in right away. Here we see Reid Duke with his beta lands. Takes down Tireless Tracker thanks to that Braid.
A Braid likely the most impactful card from Hour of Devastation here for Standard. Seeing play in almost every red deck, whether it be main or sideboard.
Yeah, right after the likes of Kaladesh being able to deal with artifacts efficiently in a way that doesn't tax your deck building too much, you can do it in the main deck. A very big deal, and for some of the decks that were previously very potent, I mean, if you look at something like a blue-red control deck whose win conditions were maybe a Dynavolt Tower, maybe a Torrential Gearhulk, they have to at least consider having additional ways of winning the game. Another Tireless Tracker here coming along. Would have been great to get both in play at the same time, but Jensen having to make do with one tracker at a time. He's got 2 clues going on now, though. Ether Hub pumping the energy count up to 3 for Reid Duke. And he could have a Glory Bringer here coming down on the 4th turn. And there we see it. Immediately getting taken down with Harness Lightning. Jensen not looking to lose any of his creatures to the big flying dragon.
Yeah, and that Harness Lightning was clutch because now that leaves Jensen fully ahead. He's going to be able to play multiple threats this turn. And he decided to crack the clue first. Is interesting. If he drew an untapped land, he could then just play a Long Tusk Cub, but it looks like now he's just going to go off with Tireless Tracker for some amount of additional value.
15.
Yeah, that tracker getting large enough that it means that at least the likes of another Braid are not going to kill it just yet, and it's going to mean that it's a fairly potent threat just on its own, but ignoring any of its clue-making potential. Tireless Trackers all round, one coming down for Reid Duke now, along with Botanical Sanctum tapped. Still got a couple of mana up thanks to that Channeler Initiate and the Mountain in play though. Now, I would guess that William Jensen in a straight-up fight with creatures ought to be favoured here, just because he's the one that has access to slightly larger creatures and pump spells.
It really depends on the mix of creatures that we're talking about, but because he's able to keep Glorybringer off the board and he got the first start on Tireless Tracker, he's certainly in the lead now.
Yeah, big swings here from that Tireless Tracker. Draws a Highness Lightning.
He actually would love to draw a land, just for to keep that Tireless Tracker going.
Yeah, and I guess one of the cool things about Tireless Tracker is between drawing a card a turn and then potentially drawing off clues, not too difficult to make sure that you hit your land drops every turn, which in turn means that you get to draw additional cards, etc., and so on. So Harness Lightning in response there to cracking that clue so that Jensen only needs to spend a couple of energy to deal with Reid Duke's tracker.
And now Reid can drop a bunch of Rogue Refiners, but that Tireless Tracker from Jensen's side of the board is getting quite large, and it might go on its own invigorated rampage, even if that's not necessarily how the deck is designed to finish games.
The Channeler Initiate, for now, still acting as a mana creature, but it's now a 3/4, so sometime fairly soon it's just going to be red zone worthy. Bristling Hydra the pickup there from William Jensen.
And he's looking to see if he can just win. It looks like he's got enough trample damage to just be lethal at this point.
Yeah, invigorated rampage here, meaning that easy enough for him to get through a whole bunch of damage. So those tricks in hand representing an additional 6 points of power and trample on that tireless tracker, and that enough for the handshake. William Jensen advancing to 4-0 here at Pro Tour Hour of Devastation. Having to take down a teammate to do it, not exactly what you want, but you know what? You kind of want to win. So just the one match left in our feature match area. We're going to get a chance to look in on Hall of Fame-elect Josh Utter-Leyton. His opponent in this matchup, we have Pavel Tronogin of Russia. Now, the deck that Pavel's on the face of things is, we have it listed as...
So it's listed as blue-red control, and it is a blue-red control deck, but it is splashing green for Attune with Ether, and then it sideboards in Bristling Hydra.
Very cool. Interesting options. This is kind of a bit of a halfway house, I suppose, between the classic red-blue control decks and the Teemo Energy decks. Meanwhile, on the other side of things, Josh Utter-Leyton's Emerge deck on the Worldbreaker end of things here, and it can actually ramp up quite significantly thanks to a little bit of help from Hour of Devastation.
Yeah, you notice he's got a bunch of Hash Up Oases and Ipnu Rivulet because Hour of Promise giving him a bunch of zombies and ramping him up to Worldbreakers makes things go pretty well. You even see him going pretty big here with Champion of the Wits.
Champion of Wits, a very impactful card. We talked about Abrade as being a big deal in Standard. I think Champion of Wits, another card that we're likely to see being fairly popular this weekend. On the front end, it lets you kind of loot for 2. On the back end, though, drawing 4 and discarding 2, also getting a 4/4 body, definitely worth the 7 mana. Now, if you're Pavel Tronogin, you're playing a control deck and you find yourself up against the likes of Worldbreakers and Eternalized creatures, is it almost inevitable that you have to just pick a new plan?
It's going to be pretty hard to win a attrition game against cards like that.
And as it turns out, even though he's able to pick up 1 game, not able to pick up 2, Josh Utter-Leyton advancing to 3-1 as he picks up his first win in Constructed here. That the end of our matches in the feature match area. We've seen a whole bunch of different decks, and I think that realistically we're going to see a whole lot more before the end of this weekend. Interested to know your thoughts in terms of, we've already spoken about Abrade being a big card in from Hour of Devastation. How do you feel like the format is shaping up in terms of aggro versus control? Are the control cards like Abrade going to be enough to hold off these aggro decks?
You're going to see a lot more mid-range than you will pure control, but you're going to see a wide range of all of it.
Lovely stuff. Well, we will see plenty more of that soon enough. But for now, we're going to take a little break from the feature match area. We'll be back soon after these messages.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the news desk. We're into standard action and great stuff. That means we're underway with the Standard Master. But someone who is a master of standard is William Jensen. Now, he had a fantastic run in Limited at the weekend. He won Grand Prix Kyoto. He's down on the floor now with Brian David Marshall.
Thanks, Rich. I'm here with Pro Tour Hall of Famer William Jensen. That was a pretty epic match, two great players. What was going on there in Game 2? Talk us through some of the decisions that you guys were making back and forth.
Game 2 was crazy. I thought for a while that I was going to lose for sure in the beginning. Then in the middle, I thought I was going to win. And then at the end, I thought, obviously, I was going to lose because I lost. But yeah, Nicole Bolas, I think I needed Reid to hit one more nonsense card off my deck. My deck has a lot of nonsense cards in it, like one pump spell or tune with the Aether or something. In the early game, there was a really interesting turn where I attacked with two Bristling Hydras, and Reid made a bunch of blocks. And the first thing I did was Harness Lightning Glorybringer. I thought that Reid might have a counterspell in his hand. And so we've actually played against each other with the two physical decks a lot leading up to this tournament. So I thought Reid might have a counterspell in his hand, and I thought I was going to lose for sure if he had a counterspell, but I thought maybe he would not want to lose, so he would let the Harness Lightning resolve, and I could sort of play a more fair game over a few turns. Turns out he didn't have it, but he did say that he had Nicole Bolas in his hand. So had I not killed Glorybringer and I kill one of the blockers to keep my Bristling Hydras alive, he would have just killed me with Nicole Bolas. So yeah, crazy game. Crazy match.
Now, we had, of the greater team of Pantheon, we had 4 different players in the feature match area, 4 different decks. No consensus deck and play testing for you guys?
No, apparently not. We're just all playing what we felt like playing this time around. So we'll see how it goes.
All right, a lot of work for this gentleman to do to get Team Puzzle Quest into the top 2 in the Pro Tour Team Series. You're going to let him go. Pairings are up. Sending it back to you at the desk.
Thanks very much, BDM. Thanks very much to William Jensen. Now, as I said, Standard Master is underway. McLaren and Hatto, that's Sean McLaren of Canada, Steve Hatto of Luxembourg. They were competing. They were the top of the standings. They both won their opening round of Standard, and so they continue to set the pace. In third was LST, Li Shi Chan of Hong Kong. He lost. He stays on 67 points, now a round and a half behind the pace. Sebastian Pozzo of Argentina, 1 to go from 66 points. That's where he was. He now gets his first win there. Kelvin Chu was in 5th. He lost. Yuya Watanabe was in 6th. He lost. So right now, advantage Hatto and McLaren. Now, what about Player of the Year and Rookie of the Year? Let's take a look at the Player of the Year scoreboard here for you. We'll give you a sense of how people are going here. So right now, remember, Marcio Carvalho is the one with it all to play for. He is well ahead of the field, and the rest of the field here, well, basically they need huge numbers to defeat him. So the fact that he is 3-1, he's in great shape. And then let's show you the Rookie of the Year scoreboard as well for you. And this has Makis Matsoukas up to 4-0. He was chasing Ben Hull, 7 points adrift. So if Matsoukas makes the top 8 and Hull does not, Rookie of the Year will go live into Sunday. So there we are. That's what's going on around the tournament. It is Deck Tech time. And one of my favorite players, he's a Pro Tour champion from Gatecrash in 2013, waiting for us at the wall with Maria, is Tom Martell.